Okay, well, let me first of all introduce myself really briefly. My name is Bill Kincaid. Recently retired from Western Illinois University, where I was on the acting faculty for 17 years. And while I was there, which is what we're going to mainly talk about and deal with today, my primary, I did all the things that somebody who runs an acting program does. The one more unusual thing that I did was specifically in the area of Shakespeare. In, I think, 2004, I worked for the first time with a group at the New England Shakespeare Festival, and they were doing Shakespeare in a way that I had not done it before. My interest prior to that was very much in, even though I appreciate Shakespeare done in lots of different ways, I was very interested in how Shakespeare might have been done by the Elizabethans, actually. And so I'd been going places like the Atlanta Shakespeare Tavern and the Blackfriars Theater in Stanton, Virginia, to see people doing some form of some version of an original practice kind of model. What I did with the New England Shakespeare Festival took things in a very different direction. I'm not here to argue the point about whether, now, the person who when I was first exposed to some of these ideas, the person who was talking to us about them was absolutely emphatic that this was exactly what people had been doing in Elizabethan England. I'm less certain about that. That's not the point I'm here to argue at all. That's not why I do it. I do it because it's a really interesting and spontaneous and exciting and unusual way to do theater work in general, and it happens here to apply to Shakespeare. Since that time, which we can also talk about at some point tonight if you really want to, I've taken the ideas from it and applied them in some different ways to some work with Eugene O'Neill and a couple of other plays that I've done too. So, but that's neither here nor there at the moment. Basically what we're talking about is a means of performing, or a set of tools for performing Shakespeare without rehearsal, which is why we call it Performing Shakespeare Unrehearsed. The majority of what we do here tonight is going to be very much driven by you. Some of that can be in the form of dialogue if you have things you want to talk about specifically with regard to this. Always happy to answer any questions, even if they are demands of like, what makes you crazy enough to think that it works this way, because I did a presentation at the American Society of Theatrical Research about this a number of years ago, and those people are out for blood. They want to attack anybody who's presenting anything. So I've defended myself against some pretty heavy duty. I don't think anybody here would probably care to, because that's one of my defenses with them too, was I'm not actually saying this happened. What I'm saying is this is a really fascinating way to work with this language, and furthermore, in an educational environment, which is where I did a lot of it, not all of it, but the majority of it, it forces students to learn to look really closely at the text instead of looking at it as a sort of series of generalities. And one of my greatest victories, I thought, with this, there's a Tom Stoppard adaptation of The Seagull, and having a student come into my office at one point, pointing to the page and slapping against it and saying, why is this comma here? And I thought, my work here is done. Yes, that's exactly what we want. So, like I said, the majority of what we do is going to be driven by having people up here and doing something so that we can make a point about it. So I would vote, everything else will come out as we go. I would vote that we go ahead and start and ask somebody to come up and do a demonstration for us.
Mary.
Yeah,
Mary.
I was hoping somebody else would go first. Only because I feel like I'm late.
It's all right. And like I say, what we're really doing here, these are going to turn out to be cold readings because of the way that we're doing it, but that's not at all the point. And in most cases, we're going to stop and start a lot because it's all about the writing and what the writing influences us to think and do. So, and actually Mary is slightly cheating because she has done this workshop before, and she actually referenced this you're not cheating on purpose, but she referenced earlier tonight when we were talking, a few years ago, but she referenced something from this monologue, so she'll remember that part, I think.
Can somebody else go first? Am I supposed to read this?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
just read it.
I'll stop you. A lot.
Am I supposed to be doing things as I go along?
You can do whatever you want. I'll tell you what I would recommend, but I'll let you do it first.
This shoe is my father.
And that's the first thing we're going to stop for. So the very first word of this makes a really important point about unrehearsed Shakespeare, because the difference between the words this and that, which we all understand, I think probably everybody here is a native speaker of English, we understand without having to really think about it exactly what the difference is between the word this and the word that. Theoretically, according to this way of working, Shakespeare worked very specifically with the distinction between those two things. We all know that when you refer to an object and you call it this, that you are touching the object. And when you say that, you are not touching the object, right? So you think about, like if I were to say this table, it implies proximity, and that table implies distance. It's actually a silly thing to stand here and say that table, right? It's cognitively dissonant, I guess. So what we assume for unrehearsed Shakespeare is that every this and every that, okay, technically when they're used as noun markers, because the word that has other purposes in the language too, right? But when they are used as noun markers, every this means to touch the object, and every that means to not touch the object.
Okay.
So there are a variety of ways. Yes, you have to touch the shoe. There are a variety of ways in which you might choose to touch the shoe, but you must touch the shoe.
Okay. This shoe is my father. No, I have to. This left shoe is my father.
Except that
I can't keep doing this left.
And every time you say this, you have to be touching the shoe. Yeah. And when I say variety, well, and so there are other solutions.
Sit down.
So Shakespeare says, touch the shoe. I call him Zombie Shakespeare because he's telling this from beyond the grave, right? Zombie Shakespeare says, touch the shoe. How you touch the shoe doesn't really matter as long as you touch the shoe.
Okay. This shoe is my father. No, this left shoe is my father. No. This left shoe is my mother. Nay, that cannot be so. Neither. Yes, it is so, it is so. It hath the worse, I have to see this. It has the worser soul, this shoe, with the hole in it. Is this about, okay.
Yeah.
Somebody else's turn. I got the idea.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
We love it. Keep going. Mary.
The hole in it is my mother.
Okay, and so we're going to stop there for a second, because yes, all the thises on the shoe are exactly right, yes? And obviously, and we all know this to a degree about Shakespeare, that when somebody says something like, take this ring, well, what do? You give a person the ring. Shakespeare didn't write in a stage direction that says, gives her the ring. Speaking of Eugene O'Neill, who would have said, gives her the ring, with a look on his face of strange, forlorn, lost foundness. But in this case, when it says left shoe, then of course you're dealing with the left shoe, yes? Now, let's go back to this shoe with the hole in it is my mother because it hath the worser soul. No, it's before that, the worser soul, right? So I'm not going to force you to go back for any of this specifically. We'll just go on from there. But mixed into all of this, of course, and I will make the point that as soon as the actor up on stage in front of you touches their shoe, I don't think there's any way to touch your shoe in a tragedy or in a tragic moment of a scene, right? It automatically reduces the status of the person who is touching the shoe, whether it's like this or down on the floor like that, or whether you take off the shoe. One way or another, it creates a comic element, right, in that moment. So Shakespeare immediately reveals whether this, well, he doesn't even reveal. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to analyze whether it's a comic scene or a tragic scene. You have to touch your shoe and let the audience decide how to respond to what's happening on stage in front of them. But there's also a horribly dirty joke here, which is when she says, this shoe with the hole in it is my mother, because the shoe with the hole is therefore a female shoe. And the pun is fantastic because it is, this is my mother, it has the worser soul. Yes, soul to our ears, which is why the plays were originally written, is both spelled S-O-U-L and S-O-L-E, right? So the pun works in a way that doesn't require an asterisk and a footnote, yes? Because people's ears hear it instead of having to see it on the page and an editor having to decide one spelling or another. So you've already said your mother was a person with a bad soul, and then you go a step further by pointing out that the shoe with the hole in it must be a female shoe, and the shoe with the hole in it has the worser soul. Therefore, all of that coming back around to the mother. But anyway, that's outside of the this and that
I wish I would
conversation.
have thought of that beforehand.
Well, feel free to go back a couple lines.
I don't want to be crude. Come on.
I think you're among friends.
We've met you,
Okay.
Wherever you want to start.
Okay. It is so. It has the worser soul. This shoe is my mother, and this is my father. A vengeance on it, so I can throw it away.
Yes, yes. Because of your next word, especially.
Oh, a vengeance on it. There.
Okay,
yeah?
and so,
Okay.
really, the majority of this monologue, the majority of points I'm making with this monologue are this and that, and by extension, these and those, right, for plural, and the word here versus the word there. It's really like a Sesame Street thing, right? Near, far, or something like that. Because,
There it is.
yes,
Okay.
there it is means it's far from you. Here it is would mean that it is close. There's an interesting thing, jumping ahead, that comes up a lot of times in these plays, where generally speaking, when someone is entering, someone else announcing them will say, there comes the Duke of York, or whatever, right? But occasionally they say, here comes my master, or here comes the sweating lord. And when you say, there he comes, then distance from the person is fine. If you say, here he comes, you have to go to the person, because the same rule applies to people as applies to a shoe, right? If you're saying this or here, it's touching. It's right there with you. And if you're saying that or there, then you create some distance. So yes, vengeance on it. There it is, a little distance from the shoe.
Is there?
Do go on.
Now, sir, this, I gotta get up. This staff, okay, I gotta find the staff.
Okay, and now here is where Mary, bless you, where Mary is the less than ideal volunteer, because I can't say to her what I usually say to a person in this situation, which is the staff is part of your anatomy, and it is there
I think
with
this is the perfect time to turn it over to someone of the male gender
or
with a staff.
or you can just play it as a male role.
Oh, okay. I guess I'll leave mine. Now, sir, the staff is my sister. For you, look you, she is as white as a lily and as small as a wand.
Which just goes to show that some kinds of jokes never go out of fashion, right? Go ahead.
Okay, this hat.
Oh, that one, I don't have a dirty joke for that one. You can have my hat.
Okay. This hat is Nan Armade. This hat that I have is Nan Armade. I am the dog.
And this, and yes, so
I
you
gotta
don't
go
have to do
down?
too well. You're on the right track,
dog.
right? Because the other thing that we do here, oh, and I should mention, like, those seats that are way back there, those are closer than some of the seats in the Globe, right? So when this material was originally written, when Shakespeare talks about suiting the action to the word, he's probably not talking about subtle action to the word, or at least he wasn't in an Elizabethan playhouse, because it wouldn't read from that distance. It's hard to hear in the playhouse. The acoustics were the best they could do for the time, but the people who are sitting in the back also hear what's going on outside. They're in the bad part of town. There are probably prostitutes down there. There's a bear baiting going on. The person next to you brought their baby to the theater. So it's hard to hear. So action to the word reinforces the meaning of what we're doing, yeah? And it usually reinforces the meaning of what we're doing with something that is relatively broad as opposed to something subtle. So that being said, when we get to I am the dog, there's some kind of I am the dog, right? Because action to the word implies you do the thing. Now, it doesn't extend as far as if you talk about something, that's different than saying that you are it, right? So if you mention a baboon, you don't have to act like a baboon. But if you say, I am the dog, then there's really no doubt. So yes, you could go down on all fours if you want, but you can do whatever you want with that hat. Yeah, I don't know. It all becomes the actor's conundrum, right? Oh, and by the way, of course, we do not do this as cold reads. When we actually do like an entire play performing this way, the people have the material for weeks ahead of time so that they can prepare and do as much preparation as they want. Although, which we'll talk about later, they only have their own lines, not other people's, so they don't know the context of it.
I am the dog. No, the dog is himself, and I am the dog. I don't get it.
Oh, well, how interesting that you say that, because I would also say everybody out here appreciated that you were the dog and then not the dog and then the dog again. right? Because it's funny and it's ridiculous. And if you don't get it, it doesn't matter because it's really about them. This is another thing that I think comes up with this a lot. Especially because we do a lot of doubling, right? With the shows with larger casts especially. So you have people who are on stage as one character, go off stage, have to get into a different costume, get into a different headspace, still be ready to come on for the next thing. They often miss plot points, especially if it's a play they don't know. So frequently actors report that at the end of the play, they don't know what happened. But the audience tends to be able to follow the action. And I've seen one particular production I'm thinking of, I've seen some Chekhov where the actors definitely knew what was going on, and the actors and the audience had absolutely no idea. Now, given a choice between two kinds of theater, one where the actors get it and the audience doesn't, or one where the actors don't get it and the audience does, I will choose the audience does every time. So yes, it is not at all uncommon to be up here, and because I said before, the actors don't know the context in which they're saying things. You may think Beatrice talks to Benedict, it seems, by looking only at her lines, and Benedict, love on, I will requite thee, right? And to her great surprise, the actress who is playing Beatrice, in that moment in the play will discover, even though she may have thought she was talking to Benedict, he's not on stage. So there are surprises like that come up all the time, and you just have to roll with them. So yeah, sometimes you don't really know what's going on, and yeah. So yes, I'm the dog. No, I'm not. Yes, I am.
Okay. All right. I am the doggy. No, the doggy is himself, and I am the dog. Oh, the doggy is me. Dog is me. And I am myself. So now I come to my father. I come to my
But your father is a shoe, as you recall. See, and again, we would have, that's another thing I should mention, that before we do a performance like this, at least what we always have done, is that the actors have a one-on-one session with the coordinator of the project. Usually, in most of the ones that I've done, it's been me, although I've acted in a few of these as well. There's a coordinator who can remind you in that moment when you have what we refer to as a text session. Yes, remember, when you say you're talking to your father, the shoe, you've already named the shoe to be your father. Yes.
Okay. I'm stepping on my mother.
Yes.
Okay. I come to you. Shoot. Now come I to my father. Father, your blessing now. Should not the shoe speak a word for weeping? The shoe's crying and can't get a word out? Okay. Now should not the shoe speak a word for weeping? Now should I kiss my father? Well, he weeps on. Now come I to my mother. Oh, that she could speak now like a wood woman. What is that? Like a wood woman. Well,
It's a pun on a woman who has been wooed and some other things, but
okay. Well, I kiss her. Why, 'tis here's my mother's breath up and down.
Another unflattering joke about the mother. It smells like a shoe's breath, or her breath smells like a shoe.
Got it. That's very real. Now I come to my sister. Where's the sister?
Sister was the staff.
Oh, yeah. Okay, now I come to my sister. Mark the moan she makes. Now the dog, all this while, sheds not a tear, nor speaks a word, but see how I lay the dust with my tears.
Exactly. And that's the end of it. Let's give Mary a supportive round of applause for all the work. So, major points being this, that, these, those, here, and there. Yeah, although some other things thrown in, like some references to action, to the word, and so forth. So far, so good? Let's go on. As you may know, there are times when there's more than one person on stage. So, we need somebody to read, and we also need a minimum of 3 other people up on stage with them, but the other people don't have to read at the moment. Would you like to read or not read? Great.
I will not read. I will not read.
That I can.
So they got a bunch of volunteers now.
They're just warming up. Okay, for the sake of ease, because we are not costumed, I'm going to suggest that the female character on stage be you. Yes, because I think that's going to make it easier for us to follow.
Suspend your disbelief.
For the 2 of you guys, come here with me for a second.
Okay.
We'll have a little private conference. So,
They're doing very big stuff.
sweet, and I don't care who's who. Perfect. Okay, so just a moment of context. We're at a wedding. These two are supposed to get married to each other, and then this is what happens. And again, we will stop for many, many things. There are thises and that's, and there are a whole bunch of other things that involve all three of the other actors too. So I'm going to not walk off the edge of this.
Please don't.
Sweet Prince, you learned me noble things.
Okay, and that's the first point that we're making here is that it is absolutely crucial that the actor do exactly what we just saw him do, right? Because that does two things at once. First of all, this actor, I always refer to the person who is speaking as the actor who has to carry the football, because it's the hardest job that anyone is doing, and everybody else's task while that person is speaking is to help them move the ball down the field, right? That is the number one thing that has to happen. And in this moment, we already talked about the number of times that suddenly it's confusing and you're not really sure what's going on, right? The lifeline for this actor is that when they say "Sweet Prince," somebody is going to step forward so they know who they're talking to, right? So it is extremely important that that happen. I have an anecdote about this too, about one time, because when I did this with New England Shakespeare Festival, one of the things they did that I thought was actually pretty brilliant in order to, because they did multiple performances of it. So they had so you had, like I was track maybe 2 and 7, and Alan was also tracks 2 and 7. And right before any given performance, they told us whether at that day's performance we were performing track 2 or track 7. And that was happening with everybody in the company. So every time the play was performed, it actually had a different combination somehow of the actors doing the roles, which resulted in, because then I was always playing a lord. This was in Richard III. It was a question of whether I was Lord Hastings or Lord Stanley. And because there's no costume designer for this per se, and every lord is basically a lord, I had one costume. It was the Stanley costume on the Stanley days, and it was the Hastings costume on the Hastings days. So Michelle, who was playing Queen Margaret, I'm going to grab the scroll because it's more effective with the scroll. I'll show you these later too. Michelle came charging at me across the stage, "And thou, Lord Hastings." But the problem was that was a Lord Stanley day, not a Lord Hastings day. So we have a disaster about to occur on the stage. She's coming toward me, and Alan very smoothly stepped in front of her, and I stepped out of the way, and the play was able to go on, right? But it's really important because in that case, Michelle was doing the heavy lifting. She was the one running the football, right? So anyway, yes, thank you for sweet princing.
Sweet Prince, you learned me noble thankfulness. There, Leonato. Take her back again. Give not this rotten orange to your friend.
Okay, cool. And this rotten orange, and the orange here, which again we would talk about in a text session, the orange is a metaphor specifically for this character, right? And he had some distance from her when he said, "There, take her back again," right? Distance for there. And now he's going to call her this rotten orange. So now he goes,
Give not this rotten orange to your friend. She's but the sign and semblance of her honor. Behold how like a maid she blushes here. Oh, what authority.
okay, yes, and let's talk about that. So, and yes, blushes here, right, so is still close to her. He hasn't, that's another word that indicates that he's close. The distance hasn't changed between the two of them. And her blush actually needs to be something very like that. Two things about it. One is that, again, Shakespeare didn't write in a stage direction, she blushes, because the stage direction is built into the dialogue. And it's what we refer to as a thrown stage direction. So he says, "Behold how like a maid she blushes here." He throws that stage direction to her. She picks up the stage direction and does something to indicate a blush. Once again, for the size of the auditorium or the theater space where Shakespeare was originally writing, which is why we get all these, why we have this idea of old time acting being so broad, right? Well, it had to be. People had to be able to see it, yes? So exactly what you did. Some version of this, right, is the blush. And audiences will always, as we know, those of us who direct, audiences will always have a tendency to look at the person who's speaking. So what's great is he has the focus for a moment and says, "Behold how like a maid she blushes here." The audience's attention is on him, and if the actor is listening closely enough, by the time they think to look at her, she's done it, right? So it's already there. Now, if you want to be that spoiler, like, I don't know, the teenager who watches The Wizard of Oz and is like, I totally saw the trapdoor opening when the witch was coming out, right? Well, of course, good, congratulations, it's not that difficult. You can spoil it, but wouldn't you rather engage and be able to look from him to her right as she blushes? Anyway.
Behold how like a maid she blushes. Oh, what authority and shoe of truth. Can cunning sin cover itself withal? Comes not that blood as...
Yeah, and that's an old spelling of blood, sorry, the old spelling. Yes, so now he says that blood, referring to the blush, right? You know, he had the there, take her back again, this rotten orange close to her, behold how like a maid she blushes here, and now it comes not that blood. So that creates distance again. Where he goes doesn't matter as long as he has some distance from her. This does get into a thing where sometimes, like when we do a text session, we also sometimes have to discuss, for example, if at the beginning you had said in your text session, yeah, when I say there, Leonardo, take her back again, I really want to shove her across the stage. We don't improvise that, right? We add that to a list of fights, dances, and anything else that has to be rehearsed so that we can coordinate that before the show and he knows that he can safely get her propelled across the stage. But anyway, so yes, now we're to that blood which creates some kind of distance between him and her.
Comes not that blood as modest evidence to witness simple virtue? Would you not swear, all you that see her?
Yes, and that is exactly what I would have asked you to do. So Shakespeare is always working with a maximum of probably 16 people in his acting company, and yet he calls for armies, he calls for battalions, he calls for guests at a wedding, right? So these people out here are always available to become the people who are storming Agincourt or the people who are doing whatever you need a crowd to do. So in this case, the guests at the wedding, and he just started to bring it out here to you. And notice what happens next. If he engages the audience here as the greater number of people at the wedding, oh, and bear in mind, as audience members, there are so many of you, the cast outnumbers you. I've done a show or two like that, I think. You guys are not behaving like a 21st century audience. You're behaving like an Elizabethan audience, which means the lights have not dimmed on you and you've never been taught to sit politely and watch a play. You know the plot of the play. You know that there's a plot to ruin her, and it's by the bad people. So if he were, for example, to say, I'm right, aren't I? You would tell him that he is not. Yes. By the way, just in case anybody here is not aware, maid is absolutely the equivalent of virgin. It's not somebody who cleans your house. Yes. When he says maid, the question is not whether she is a house cleaner. The question is whether she is a virgin. And you know she is. She's been accused of not being, which is why he's jilted. So anyway.
All you that see her, that she were a maid. By these exterior shoes,
and now he says these exterior shows. Now, this, I know we're getting really, because we're stopping so much, it becomes hard to see, it becomes disjointed and you don't see all this. But remember at the beginning, there, take her back again, this rotten orange, that blood, these shows, these exterior shows, right? So he is far from her, with her, far from her, with her, far from her, with her. Now, really it's up to the audience who's watching to figure out how that's interpreted. We just execute and we allow them to interpret, but this always makes me think of like high school and college romances I've known where people are like, I am never speaking to her again. We are over, we are done. And the next day they're back with each other, and 3 days later, yes, exactly. 3 days later, they're never going to be with each other again. I think this staging, which is all inherent in these few words, implies the same thing, because he loves her so much, but he thinks it's his responsibility to jilt her because she's not pure.
All you that see her, that she were a maid by these
She is a maid.
exterior shoes, but she is none.
She is.
She knows the heat of a luxurious bed. Her blush is guiltiness, not modesty.
Yes, and when then that's the end of his speech. When that participation comes from the audience, it's free. Because of the disjointed way we do it, you didn't really get a chance to get the full arc of this, but he asks, wouldn't you swear she was made by these exterior shows? You answer, and his next thing he says, so, would you not swear, all you hear, that she were made by these exterior shows? But she is none. You know what I mean? He engages directly with the audience in conflict by asking them a question, and when they answer, coming right back at them. Hamlet actually does the same thing in the to be or not to be soliloquy, right? He asks questions, and then when the audience, if the audience answers, he comes right back at them and shuts down their response, which I think is really, really interesting. Yeah, so yes, the other thing that I'll mention about this is that it is always fair game. I assume that it will be fair game for me now, but I'll ask. May I touch you on the back?
Yes.
We always do it on the back. Yeah, just to be clear. But it's fair game when you are the one carrying the football to take another actor with you if you need to. Would you not swear, all you that see her, that she were a maid? Because again, she's going to support what the football carrier is doing. So if he indicates, come along with me, and not just in this context, but in a lot. There's like, walk with me and let's talk about the Duke of Kent, right? Whatever it is, when you move an audience, or toward the audience or anywhere else on stage, and you have a long speech, you can take somebody with you, and they will always cooperate. Yeah? All right. Applause for Claudio and company. Thank you. Somebody can stay up if they want. And you may also know that sometimes there's more than one actor who speaks in a scene. So now we have two. Okay. So, this might be a good time too to let you see these. The way these are all set up, you can control them with just one thumb, like that. They roll, well, this one's super loose right now, so it doesn't give you a real feel for it. But you carry these on, the way we perform, we carry these on stage with us. We think of them as the same way that you would think of music on the stand of an instrumentalist during a symphony orchestra, right? That the audience accepts that they are there and it doesn't really interfere. It's just part of the whole thing. We use them to cue. We don't cold read off of them, obviously. But you can see on these that there are
How quickly can we get some of those?
and you can see here, there are a series of dots across the page coming up on usually a 4-syllable cue. And immediately under that 4-syllable cue is the line that you would say. So the part that's next to the dots is the cue you hear. Whenever you hear that cue, which may be 3 seconds to 3 minutes after what you have just said before, when you hear that cue, that's you, and off you go. Yeah? And these I gave you really short ones that we just use for demonstrations, but you can have a whole show queued up on one of these, all of your lines with only 4-syllable cues before each one. So we need 2 actors here, so can I get somebody else up? And notice which one you gave her. The one with more words. To be fair, it is also the female character, yes. Okay, and you will need these. And it would be great, although certainly with our small numbers, I'm happy to be one of them. It would be great if we had a king and a queen up here also. They don't have to talk.
My best work without.
They're talking?
Okay, so, and again, just for our continuity as we watch and the ease of people on stage, because it's less confusing, we'll allow you to be the king and you to be the queen. Yes? Okay, and whoever doesn't have a cue before their line talks first, which I think in this case is you.
There's Rosemary. That's for remembrance. Pray, love, remember. And there is...
Oh, Paconsies. It's probably a misspelling of pansies, but...
Right. I've seen those pansies. That's for thoughts.
Document madness, thoughts and remembrances fitted.
And before we go on, notice that you have picked right up on this and done exactly the right thing with each of the theirs, because there's a big difference between what I would say is more normal behavior, which is, here's a flower, right? But what we got instead was, there's a flower. And that little bit of difference between here's a flower versus there's a flower indicates that something is funky with her, yeah? She keeps an unusual amount of distance. There are other ways to do the there, because it could wind up being there's, right? But whatever you do, the normal way of handing people flowers is not distance from the flower. So as soon as you do that, it makes you seem just a little, something's not exactly
It's not
right,
quite right.
which of course we know to be true.
It's Dr. There's fennel for you and columbine. There's rue for you. And here is some for me. We may call it Herb Grace Sundays.
Okay,
Oh,
cool,
where?
cool. And we're going to stop for something here because we've introduced another word, which is another one of the clues for something, which is we may call it Herb Grace Sundays. For unrehearsed Shakespeare, you can never say the word we and stand by yourself because technically we is plural, right? So at that moment, even if you've been keeping your distance otherwise, then it needs to be we with somebody. And if you're wondering how close it needs to be we, it is uncomfortably close. So can I demonstrate with you for a moment?
Absolutely,
Okay, we will both know because we grew up in a Western culture. We will both know that this is perfectly acceptable and that this is not, right? We both, like there are little synapses that fire in both of our brains are like, we are too close together, yes? As soon as you feel those, then it's we.
Okay.
And if you're further apart than that, then it's not. What the students do all the time is sort of get in this surfboard posture so they can say, well, no, it is we. Look how close my foot is. But they've actually bailed out on it. If you want it to be a full-blown we, you really want it to be, and there are some other things that bring that up too. Same thing with this woman. This woman, right, we, they're both very close together. So, yes, we may call it Herb Grace Sundays, brings you together with somebody.
Okay.
What you did was great. I will mention that there is another possibility here, always with the flowers, well, assuming that they're not expensive props, which is these people are always an option to hand flowers to too, because with unrehearsed, they are always there with us and we can use them anytime that it's appropriate. It would not be appropriate, for example, to speak of the king and refer to someone in the audience. That doesn't make any sense because the king is a character on stage and that just confuses. But in a case where you're able to say like, here's fennel for you, you can absolutely do that to an audience. So pick up wherever you want.
Okay, there's rue for you. Here's some for me. We may call it Herb Grace Sundays. You must wear your rue with a difference. There's a daisy. I would give you some violets, but they all withered when my father died. They say?
They doesn't have to be anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
They say we made a good end, for bonny sweet Robin is all my joy.
Thought, affliction, passion, hell itself, she turns to favor and to brilliance.
Yeah, and that's it. Yay. Okay, good. Yeah, makes sense. This one was really all about the putting it into action, adding some props, and really about the we. Other forms of we are, oh, thank you. Other forms of we are us and our, right? So whenever any of those three words comes up, it always implies grouping of some sort. What about the royal we, I hear you asking? Well, funny you should ask, and I know you just sat down, but could maybe the two of you come up and, so kings do not have to ever cross to anyone. It's an exception to the rest of the rules, but because of the status, they don't have to. So how does the royal we function? So when a king, for example, if I say something, if I say this man, he has to cross to me. This man, yeah, because I'm the king. Royal we functions the same way. If you are both in the room with me, and I say, we have heard of, your crimes are manifest, and we hereby declare that you shall not yes, exactly. So the king, by using the royal we, the king has automatic backup. Yes, and people will have to group in that way. Cool, thank you. Just really wanted to be backed up by a couple of tough guys. Yeah? So, here, there, this, that, these, those, we, us, and our so far. Yep? Good. And more. This time 3 people speak. And I have a new rule to introduce. Yeah?
Todd hasn't spoken yet.
My time.
Okay.
Nora.
Is that anything?
Oh, yeah, Mike.
Yes.
Okay. Note that at the top of your page you have a character name that may eventually come in handy. All right? So if you do not have a cue at the top, it means you talk first. Yes. And I don't know. There may be something come up that I have to comment on in here that I should have warned you about. I'm not sure. But bear in mind, I think there's not a lot here to trip over except for the new rule. But we would have each one of you individually would have talked to me in a text session and made sure to clarify anything here that you actually should know. That doesn't reveal anything about the play that doesn't need to be revealed.
Oh, worthiest cousin, the sin of my ingratitude even now was heavy on me. Thou art so far before that swiftest...
Okay, good, and we're going to stop there because we've come to the magic word, thou, yeah? So thou, if you've studied a lot of world languages, most European languages, they all have some kind of second person singular, right? Which is like tu in French and tu in Italian, du in German, etc. I think it's even, well, yeah, I'm not sure. Anyway, they all have tu in Spanish, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they all have that. English's equivalent is thou, but it was passing out of common use by the time Shakespeare wrote, but it was still being used. So we treat this, because he sometimes switches even in the middle of a line, right? From thou to you, or from you to thou. So since thou, second person singular, generally, if I can use you, implies some kind of closeness, like you call family members that, we translate that into physical closeness. So if I call you thou, it's like a we, I get right into the space, yeah? If I am in a thou with you, or I've said we, and then I say you, I create distance between the two of us. So you is for a little bit more distance, thou is for closeness. If this is too much to remember, think in terms of, it feels uncomfortable to say thou, and it feels uncomfortable to stand this close to you. You feels more natural in both terms of where you're supposed to be and in terms of the use of the language itself, yeah?
Does the royal we apply in this?
The royal we does apply because you're king. And so actually, this is the thing that I should have warned you about beforehand. It's actually you that he's speaking to at the beginning.
Okay.
Yes. So, and you need to know that.
Worthiest cousin, thou art so far before that swiftest ring of recompense is slow to overtake thee.
Yeah, even closer for thee. Yeah.
The swiftest ring of recompense is slow to overtake thee. Would thou hadst less deserved that the proportion both of thanks and payment might have been mine.
Sure, yeah.
So if the king is saying thou, and then the people, the king wouldn't move to the person.
Right. The king has the option. If he wants to, he can, but he's king. So.
But does that mean that thou brings them to the closeness to him?
Yes, yes. Yep, yes, yep.
So valid, only it might have been mine, separate. Only I've left to say more is thy due than more than all can pay.
The service and the loyalties I owe in doing it pays itself. Your Highness' part is to receive our duties.
Okay, now,
duties?
our duties, yes.
Our duties.
And in fact, even your Highness, right? Because it's a you, so a little bit of your Highness, just kind of arm's lengthy, yeah?
Okay.
And then our duties, yep.
Your Highness's part is to receive our duties, and our duties to your throne and state, children and servants, would do but what they should by doing everything safe toward your love and honor.
Welcome hither. I have begun to plant thee, and will labor to make thee full of growth. Noble Banquo, thou hast no less deserved, so thou, bring him in.
Yep.
Thou hast no less deserved, nor must be known no less to have done so. Let me enfold thee. Hold thee to my heart.
There, if I grow, the harvest is your own.
Yeah, so now within this scene, it's such an interesting dynamic to me because we have the clear exclusion of Banquo at first from the conversation. Then you attempt to bring Banquo into the conversation. Then you pull Banquo aside, say, here, I'll give you a hug, and Banquo says, and the last word you say is, so sorry that I just did that. My heart. Yes? And that appears to be what you're referring to when you say there in your heart if I grow, which is distance, right? You did the distance, but it would be specifically the heart. My heart, there in your heart if I grow, the harvest is your own. So after being pulled into this intimate relationship with the king, Banquo deliberately creates distance with the king, which is really, really interesting. And again, this is not something that, that we're going to do a character analysis about. It's something that if we follow all these rules, we see that Banquo is distancing himself a little bit from Duncan already in this scene. But the actor doesn't even have to know that. It happens if you do what the words say. Yeah? So that's that one. That's how the thou works. Great. Thank you. Thank you. So here, there, these, those, this, that, we, us, and our, and now the introduction of thou versus you. Yeah? Cool. We talked a little bit before about following stage directions and giving stage directions. You may be glad to know that only one person speaks this time, but we need 2 other people to follow stage directions.
I follow stage directions. But I was
Okay, good.
What am I doing? Am I speaking? Okay.
Yes. And actually, for this one, all you need to really worry about, you don't have to, I mean, you can do the crossing if you want to, but the big thing that we're focused on is what's happening here. And this actor, like we talked about before, there's a little bit of prestidigitation here, right? You're going to be watching naturally, you're going to want to watch the actor who's speaking. And these actors are going to respond so quickly to the stage directions they're given that if you ever do look at them, you will find that they are doing the thing. You need to decide now who's going to play he and who's going to play she.
I shall give it to you.
Okay.
I'm he.
Okay.
So when you hear a he stage direction, you do it. When you hear a she stage direction, you do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. He takes her by the palm. I, well said, whisper. With as little a web as this will I ensnare as great a fly as Cassio. I smile upon her, do. I will give thee in thine own courtship. You say, true, 'tis so indeed, if such tricks as these strip you out of your lieutenantry,
Yes.
it had been better you had not kissed your 3 fingers so oft, which now again you are most apt to play with, sir.
Mine or hers, I'm not sure.
Is it hot?
Very good, well kissed.
So mine?
I loved it. I loved it.
An excellent curtsy. 'Tis so indeed. Yet again your fingers to your lips? Would they were cluster pipes for your sake?
Yes. And cluster pipes, by the way, are enema tubes, just to spice up that image for you. So yeah, and you see how nerve-wracking it is to be the ones over there like, oh, and how tempting it is to want to look to the person like, yes, what do we do now? And also, because this always happens, right? At some point in the middle, there are no stage directions, and you get nervous. Like, what's happening? What should I be doing? And basically, you just stay in whatever you're in, right? And in the moment, because this leads to some of the most interesting discoveries, yes, you heard the kiss the 3 fingers, you're like, whose fingers? My fingers? Her fingers? What's supposed to be happening here, right? And as soon as you do that, the audience catches up with you or gets ahead of you, right? As opposed to if you hear something and you do it, how wrong can it really be? Something else is going to happen 30 seconds from now. You know what I mean? Like, it goes on. It goes on. We make it through. So, but yeah, so there's this throwing of stage directions by the person who's reading and a constant alertness to stage directions from the other. Here, this is specifically about physical, almost completely about physical stage directions, but there are things like, I know this one because it was my cue to enter. And in good time, here comes the sweating lord. And the first time I heard that, I was on my way on stage because my cue had come to enter, but I didn't know I was sweating. So, and in good time, here comes the sweating lord. Right? It just has to be something that you try to do instantaneously because it's going to, you never know when something is going to matter to what happens next. One temptation that you very wisely avoided was doing anything you weren't told. Like if you start doing what as 21st century actors we often value, which is then yes-anding each other to the point where you're creating something that isn't in the text, that can be really dangerous because then the next thing that happens, you can have already contradicted what's about to happen in the scene. So in other words, if you decide to start laughing together, and then she says, "Note how they weep," then when you start to weep, it becomes a comic moment that doesn't fit the scene, right? Because it's a commentary on the technique, not a part of the story itself. So this is a really tricky thing. But you guys, like I said, you avoided that, and that's good. Sometimes you are just doing nothing until you're told to do something, and then you do it. So great, thank you. Shoot, I was going to tell something else about that specific. Oh yes, when I say the show goes on, something else is going to happen in 30 seconds. We don't want to stop for anything, right? So something I haven't talked about at all for the actual performances themselves. You're set up with a prompter who always sits generally right in the center of the front, at least the way that we do it. New England Shakespeare Festival did it a little bit differently, but it's somebody who has the whole text in front of them. So if something goes wrong, if somebody doesn't say their line, or somebody doesn't, God forbid, somebody doesn't enter, the prompter says the line and just keeps the action moving. Typically what happens is if I'm there and I, for whatever reason, didn't hear my cue. Oh, because of course, as you can imagine, a really problematic thing is if somebody has a tendency to say things like, "The news is, sir, the Volsces are in arms." That's never a great vocal kind of pattern in the theater anyway, but here it's deadly because if the other actors don't hear the last 4 syllables of your cue, they tend to not speak, right? So let's say I don't hear my cue because one of my fellow actors does that or whatever. And so somebody says, "What's the matter?" And I just stand here, and the prompter immediately says, "The news is, or the Volsces are in arms." As soon as I realize it's mine, I just jump right in. What we do, we don't thank the prompter or acknowledge it in any way, just keep on going so the show keeps moving at all costs. Now, occasionally, somebody is really lost, or something really crazy happens. And actually, the way these are put together, oh, this is a single page. Shoot. I'm not sure I brought any longer ones. Is this one longer? The pages are taped together. No, this is just one, two. Oh, well, anyway. A lot of them go on and on. You know, like some of them, larger characters are like 17 pages of this, right? And we tried to look into getting them printed somehow on a continuous stream of paper, and it's prohibitively expensive. So what winds up happening is you have all these printed pages and you laboriously tape them all together in a long string, and then you put them onto the scroll. Once in a while, somebody will get confused while they're taping them together and get the pages in the wrong order. This is extremely rare, but, and see, when we first did this at the university, I had a graduate assistant who was helping prepare these, and we had grant money for it. So that was great. So that person did a lot of this kind of work. Then, when the grant ran out, we started having everybody build their own scrolls because it was unreasonable to ask somebody to do all that without some kind of compensation, right? So that's when we started occasionally running into this problem if somebody isn't careful enough while they do that. And under those circumstances, the prompter has to step in and sometimes play the role for a while. Whoa. Hello. Yes. Did that take you back to junior high?
What happens when the rubber bands break?
Yes, and these are old rubber bands, so I'm not surprised that happened. I always had 3 because I was afraid of that. And something that some other people did is use hair ties instead of rubber bands because they're guaranteed not to do that to you, right? But yeah, occasionally the prompters had to get up and play the role for a short time. But again, as soon as the actor realizes, they just come in and the prompter returns to their seat. It's a funny thing because if the spirit of this, if you can capture the spirit of this and the audience knows what you're doing, then the prompter frequently gets applause for that. People are supportive of it, but it doesn't seem to, I mean, this is completely subjective evaluation on my part. It doesn't seem to make the audience completely check out of the play. They're into the spirit of it because they realize that what's happening is actually like a tightrope walker in front of them. You know what I mean? They are so supportive of the actors who are up there doing this incredibly difficult thing. Yeah. So yeah, that's the prompter. That's kind of the fail-safe. I wanted to mention that.
How do you curtain speech the audience at the beginning? Like, is that
yeah.
To let them know how exactly if they don't know what's going on?
Yes. I actually recently did one of these with I did 3 of them, which was really cool. At the University of North Dakota, we did All's Well That Ends Well Thursday night, Romeo and Juliet Friday night, and Comedy of Errors Saturday night. And I had a curtain speech that I did for each one of them that I'd written up in advance, and it tried to touch on each one of those things. And what I did was I even built into it, each of my paragraphs ended with somehow saying, the actors are up here hearing their cues for the first time, right in front of you. And then the second paragraph, however that ended, said, these, I don't know what it would be, something else, blah, 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 right in front of you. And then by the third time I got to it, I started getting to that point and saying, for the first time, and getting the audience to say right in front of you with me to try to get them into the spirit of that so that they had some kind of sense. Now, the other thing that I tried, I've done a lot of these, and I wish I had thought of this years ago. For Comedy of Errors, I told them, because we do all the, the fight work beforehand, so it's rehearsed in some form, so that kind of thing is not improvised. So we had this idea that we could save time on the fight choreography if we didn't worry about the naps, right? So we could do whatever, but not worry about whether somebody is, however they're trying to create the nap. So I told the audience that beforehand, and we practiced a couple times. I said, so if you see somebody, the fight director was up there with me, and I said, if you see somebody do this, and I pretended to hit her, you do this. And through the whole of Comedy of Errors, which has a lot of moments of just, people hitting servants and things like that, the audience was right there with us. Every time anybody hit anybody, you heard a bunch of people in the audience do a nap, which was great. So they were constantly participating in the process, which is what we're always trying to achieve. A few times when I first did this, I think I went overboard and I said, I don't know, feel free to talk to the audience. I don't remember exactly what I said, but then we got people who thought it was a heckle fest, and that was trouble. There's some kind of balance you want to get to where people realize that they're not being given license to do anything they want, but that if they're invited to speak, they can speak, etc. So, yeah, but it definitely requires a curtain speech of some sort. It's helped when we've been in unusual theater settings, like not with a darkened house, or not with this divide. If the audience can be nice and close, that helps because they already feel like part of the action. My dad would, bless him, my parents would come to, lots and lots of these. They didn't make all of them, but they would come to many of these, and they'd always be sitting there somewhere near the front. My father was referred to as the old man or the passage of time more times than I care to count. Whenever anyone would say, blah, 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 like an old man, they would always come right to my dad. Because when the people are that close, too, then the actors are able to use them more. And like we said about the giving of the flowers, the we, us, and our that way, there are some great moments when people can just come and be a we with the audience and involve people. So that helps people get to know what's going on, too. But yeah, I wouldn't really want to do it without some kind of preliminary information to them.
Good luck, everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
What is the typical rehearsal time for this?
I usually give them their script about a month beforehand, so they have time to prepare. I definitely had some students who waited until 3 days before, anyway, because that's how it works. But I tried to give them the script a month in advance, and then I would start scheduling these one-on-one text sessions. Depending on the actor, that would be or the size of the role would be anywhere from an hour to 3 hours that we would spend together going through everything in the script. And then we've done it a couple different ways, but typically we would never bring the cast together until the day of the show. We'd allow an hour beforehand to do the fight direction and whatever else had to be done. Oh, I should say too, this was my department has a really strong fight program, stage combat program, so that really helped. I don't think I would do that in just any department, right? But we would know, we would know that the people cast as Tybalt and Mercutio were really solid fighters, and then we'd give them a relatively simple fight that they could.
And they've got experience.
Right, they have enough experience, and they know the safety protocols and everything.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. So we would usually do an hour right before, which was exciting for us too, to try to get it all in. It's just sort of added to the actor experience. There's something I was going to say about that. What was it? Oh yes, about casting. This is totally arbitrary. We only did it for fun. We would not reveal, we would ask the actors not to reveal what their casting was until the day of the show. So
Well, that's cool.
Romeo doesn't know who's playing Juliet, etc. until, and a lot of times those things then you find out in the rehearsed segments beforehand during the fights and the dances and so forth.
Sure.
But if we could avoid it, we wouldn't even find out then. So you would have somebody show up on stage, not like with the Sweet Prince, You Learn Me Noble Thankfulness. Like somebody out here must be playing this role. And then when we could, we'd make little jokes, like have the guy who was playing Romeo be the boyfriend of the girl who was playing Juliet, and things like, you know what I mean? Like if we could do anything like that were just in jokes for us, we did that too, because all of that just added to this sort of, I don't know, festival spirit of it. Yes.
So you only do it once, or you
At the university, we did only do it once, and that was just
do it
because,
a second time? That's spontaneous gone.
right.
But is that where the varying roles?
Flipping
come
cast,
in?
yes, yeah. So like when New England Shakespeare Festival did it with all that varying roles, they were able to keep a level of that spontaneity. At the university, the way that it worked out with the rest of our schedule, we really only got one weekend to do this anyway because they were constantly doing other shows, you know, so it was like the one weekend and we would do 3 shows in a weekend, so we did each one of them once.
Do you find that the comedies are easier than the tragedies? Seems like the spirit of comedy would be easier for this rather than tragedy. being
Yeah.
so serious.
That's a great question, and I have a couple thoughts about that. One of them is there are elements of it in comedy that obviously this lends itself, like making mistakes is so forgivable in a
Right,
comedy
yeah.
because it's just fun. Making a mistake in a tragedy, the audience has to forgive you in a different way.
Yeah.
I do think the audience, if they get on board, they are really invested in the tragedies too, which I find is really, really interesting. When we did Romeo and Juliet, you know, Romeo dies with Juliet in the tomb, and then she suddenly revives, and you could hear an audible gasp from the audience. I'm like, who doesn't know this story? Who are you? And we're outside, and they have scrolls in their hand, and still, you know what I mean? But people, they want to be able to suspend their disbelief and have that experience, right? And so they tend to get really on board. And then we started getting bold, and we did some crazy stuff, like we did Measure for Measure and Timon of Athens and stuff, because it's like, why not? And people stuck with us. I do think there are some things about the comedies, obviously, that lend themselves, and you have to be really careful in the tragedies because there was also in the same Romeo and Juliet, unfortunately, Paris got stabbed and died and didn't say, "Oh, I am slain," which is the next person's cue to speak. So then you just had this long sort of silence, and then finally the prompter said, "Oh, I am slain." You know, so that was not, things like that are trickier to get over, but hopefully everybody is good enough that they don't do that, but it's hard, yeah. And then also there are moments in a lot of the tragedies which are intentionally comic relief, right? Like Romeo and Juliet again, which is just crazy to me because, I mean, I read it sometime when I was in high school, right? But then I was in a couple productions and I was not a dedicated enough student to realize that this scene had been cut from both productions that I was in. Right after they carry Juliet, they think she's dead, and they agree, the friar tells them to carry her off to the tomb, and they carry her off, and the musicians are still on stage. And they start making dick jokes and being mean to each other, and then one of them says like, well, I guess basically the equivalent of, well, I guess now we're not gonna get dinner, and they all leave. And people cut it all the time because it doesn't fit with the idea of tragedy, but Shakespeare has this little comic banter right there, which is so interesting, so that the pendulum keeps swinging. So there's still, in some of the tragedies at least, there's that sort of playful element that keeps getting introduced. It seems a little weird to us sometimes, I think, but it's there.
So do you usually do the full plot, like you don't cut any, or do you?
That's a good question too. Yeah, I cut. I don't like to. I only, let's call it trim.
Okay.
I will never cut a character. And what I try to do is, like, within speeches, if there's something that I think gets a little just over the audience's heads, and I don't mean to insult the audience, but you know, my goal was usually to cut trim off 5 to 10%, so it was just a little bit leaner, but I don't even like doing that. But yeah, I go back and forth about that, to tell you the truth, because I want to do the whole thing, but I also realize people don't necessarily want to see the whole thing. So that's really hard.
Yeah.
And the thing with the actors too, honestly, the actors, they're usually terrified if it's their first time doing it, right? Like after a while at the university, we had upperclassmen who knew what they were doing, which really helped. But if actors like at University of North Dakota, they're doing it for the first time, they're terrified. They come on stage in Act 1 and like 5 minutes in, they're like, oh, this is fantastic. And then Act 2, they're really humming. They're like, yes, if they like it now, just think how they'd feel if I slowed down and took more time, and which is not good. And then by the time you get to Act 4, the actors are like, oh my God, there's another act after this one. And they sort of limp toward the finish line. I always try to tell them, you gotta pace yourself for this. It's like, it is not a sprint, right? It's an endurance, it's a marathon, yeah? So what you want is you want to be able to sort of accelerate the pace as you're moving into Act 5, because a lot of times the whole audience is with you by then. What's gonna happen? The twins are gonna find out, the twins are gonna find each other. Romeo's gonna die, Juliet's gonna die. Like, the audience is already there. So don't indulge, move through that 5th act. You know, because they do. They get tired, and when they're tired, the audience is tired, and they're like, another nap.
Intermission, or do you do it straight through?
We've done it straight through, and that's another thing I actually have said in the curtain speech is, look, we're going to do this without an intermission.
Be where you're standing.
Yeah. You all know where the facilities are. You know, if you want to, we got to the point where we had a local restaurant that was bringing us refreshments that they sold over to the side and say, you know where the refreshments are. You know where the bathroom is. If you need to get up and stretch your legs, do that, whatever, you know. And I think that was pretty successful because, it seems like they want it to go straight through, especially if they know they don't have to sit still and be nice.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
4 hours deep in the Hamlet, they're like,
Right. And you know what? I have not done that one, because that one scares me, because it's just such a monstrously long thing. Although we did King Lear, which is long too.
Wow.
And bizarrely, like when we did this past spring in North Dakota, All's Well That Ends Well, which I was like, okay, we'll do this. I knew Romeo and Juliet would work. I knew Comedy of Errors would work. And I had done both of them before. What about All's Well That Ends Well? The audience loved it. I was very surprised. Cool. And then, like, sort of like what I said before, the woman playing Helena, it's, I don't know, Act 5, Scene 1 or something, and she says, all's well, and the whole audience said, that ends well. And she went right on. So, playing a little thing, and the audience ate it up. It's such a weird play, and somehow in performance, it went really, really well. Cool. Want to do a couple more? We've covered almost all the major things. Oh, but this one's really fun. We do need almost everybody. There are 5 people. How are we on time? So yeah, it doesn't really matter. But if you find that you have only one line, well, I'm not even sure if that's true.
Only one line.
Let's see. Okay, so I think you 2 enter together. You 3 don't compare notes, but stand in the same area. And you enter to begin the scene.
Okay. Ready?
Yes, okay, wait a minute.
Yes.
Okay, so I say that.
Yes.
And then I wait, and when I hear that.
That you are so. Yes, then you say
That's
that.
my- okay.
Yep.
All right. So foul and fair a day I have not seen.
How fair is it to call? How far is it called to swords? What are these, so withered and wild in their attire that look not like the inhabitants of the earth, and yet are honest?
Yes, cool. So, can you throw that to them even more? Because it was a little, they weren't sure what to
Not
do.
quite
And you know what you're doing,
Yeah.
right? You know that you are throwing them stage directions.
Okay.
Yes? Okay.
How far is it called to swords? What are these, so withered and so wild in their attire that look not like the inhabitants of the earth, and yet are on it? Live you, or are you aught that man may question? You seem to understand me by each at once her choppy finger laying upon her skinny lips. Should you should be willing, yet your beards forbid me to interpret them myself.
Speak if you can. What are you?
All hail Macbeth. Hail to thee, Thane of Glamis.
Okay, for the thee, it's going great. For the thee, you want to get right in Macbeth's face.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, they'll help you, we think.
Okay.
All hail Macbeth. Hail thee, Thane of Glamis.
All hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor.
All hail Macbeth, thou shalt be king hereafter.
Yes, brilliant. Yay. And the point, of course, really being the following of stage directions, right, that sometimes come in really unexpected forms. What I love about this, and I wish I knew the truth about how this would originally have been done, because as you saw with these guys, if you do what is being asked of you, you barely need a costume. You're like withered and wildly attired, and then you lay your choppy finger on your skinny lips, and you're so much a witch without anything else. It's really, really brilliant. Great, thank you.
Awesome witches.
Yes. Oh, and I also want to shout out Mike there for, perhaps in this room we would all be bold enough to do this anyway, but what happens all the time when I do this with students for the first time is they won't aggressively cross to Macbeth because the other witch has already gone there. So, sorry, this is so hard. Can you two come up here just for a second? So I'll show you what I'm talking about. So let's say that I'm trying to get to Mary, that I've been told when I was in high school never to cross in front of another actor. So I'm like, all hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor, right? Instead of just getting the hell in there. And like in that case, Mike went there, not worrying about whether there's some kind of imaginary rule against that. And the imaginary rule is, okay, you cross into Mary now. I'm standing here, she crosses in, I have the next line, I can get the hell out of the way to do that, right? Or any good actor, actors don't do it because they expect directors to do it for them, but the director is probably going to have them counter, right? So for this, we just counter on our own. She moved in front of me, I move aside so that I'm still part of the picture. So yes, thank you for that. Because yeah, that's the key to this too. Tentativeness, it's like when they say dogs can smell fear, the audience does not like tentative, unrehearsed Shakespeare. They like confident, unrehearsed Shakespeare. All right, I will not lie to you, this is a doozy. Uh-oh, and I have 2 copies of the same page. Somebody do something entertaining while I get the correct page up.
Mary, you're up. Do that big thing again. You play with your set while he's still.
There we go.
I can't wait for this to be on YouTube. This is the live stream we tagged it.
Okay, now I think we're all right. William's wife wags her.
Lance's term from the
I have 3, and it is, yeah, not gonna lie, it's long, but it's great, it's fantastic. And yeah, just pick. You can see now that one of them has 2 sides. Okay, so you're off stage to begin with, and we need, do you mind if we use your water bottle?
No.
That can be your taper, which is a candle, if you don't know. And yeah, this has a little bit of all of those other elements we've talked about, but the most important one, which is sometimes counterintuitive, and is definitely counterintuitive sometimes in this scene, is, okay, if I say someone's name, and it's clear that I'm talking to them, I cross to them. So which is not to say like, we all know about Mary, that's not addressing Mary, right? It's Mary, we all know about you. If I say her name, I cross to her. But if I say, Mike, you and I know about Mary. I cross to Mike, right? So, and a lot of times, sometimes that will be other things. Oh, right. We were just saying this. So, if I say Mary, yes. If I say Mrs. Williams, right? If I say Mrs. Mayer, there are so many different ways that, especially in a history, ways that characters refer to each other. So in the text sessions, we cover, what are these relationships? If you call someone brother, if you call someone whatever else. Now, yes. The thing in this scene is that there's very little of that. It may occasionally happen, there's very little of that. There is the opposite, which is, if there are, this is a complicated rule, if there are 3 people on stage or more, and you have a line and you do not address someone directly, then you cross to the person who gave you your cue. You always want to be crossing, because otherwise it leads to those scenes which we've all seen in Shakespeare of 8 people on stage with nobody moving, right? And you can't tell anything about the relationships or anything because nobody's moving, yeah? But in this case, you always want to cross to your cue giver unless you say, Mary, blah, blah, blah. If Mike gave me my cue, but my next line says, Mary, I think we should, right? Then I'm crossing to Mary. Make sense? So it's easier said than done. It's going to be hardest for you, just FYI. Oh yeah, he's not on stage yet.
In this slumbering agitation, besides her walking and other actual performances, what at any time have you heard her say?
That, sir, which I will not repeat after her.
You may to me, and 'tis most meek you should.
Neither to you nor anyone. No witness to confirm my speech. Lo you, here she comes.
Okay, I'm going to stop for just a second. Here she comes, as opposed to there she comes, so you need to cross
Okay.
to, yes?
Lo you, here she comes. This is her very goddess, and upon my life, fast asleep. Observe her and stand close.
How came she by that light?
It stood by her. She has light by her continually. 'Tis her command.
Okay, I'm going to stop just there for just a second because it worked, but I want to point it out. There's such an interesting contradiction here because this actor has to follow a stage direction, which is observe her, stand close, and then the line is, how came she by that light? So if you obey the stage direction, you stand close and then say that light and give distance, yeah? Which is just such a fascinating piece of blocking. Like, as a director who is blocking a show, I would like to think of that, but I wouldn't think of that. Instead, it's just here. So we can start up right where we were.
Why it stood by her, she has light by her continually. 'Tis her command.
You see, her eyes are open.
Aye, but their senses are shut.
What she does now. Look how she rubs her hands.
It's an accustomed action with her. Seen thus, and thus seems like it should be something.
Yeah, probably thus washing her hands. Thus is kind of a
Yeah.
middle ground thing. Yeah.
Yeah, thus washing her hands.
Is it going to be easier if I take this
I've,
away from you?
I've done her to continue in this a quarter of an hour.
Yet here's a spot.
Hark, she speaks. I will set down what comes from her to satisfy the remembrance more strongly.
How tense.
Okay, and I told you this was going to be the hardest for you. So, I think somehow, many of us at least, have an idea that in this scene, she can't interact with them because she's in her fantasy world. But if we follow the rules in this scene, then every time you speak, you're going to cross to your cue giver.
Thank you.
Hark, she speaks. I will set down what comes from her to satisfy my remembrance the more strongly.
Out, damn spot. Out, I say. 1, 2. 'Tis time to do it, hell's murky. 5, my lord, fire soldier. And afeard? What need we fear? Who knows it when none can...
Yes, and I'm going to stop you for just a second. Yes, to all of it, right? Notice that here, there's also what need we fear. So as if we needed more justification, this character is including this character. It's not what need I fear, right? It's what need we fear. So that bond, physical bond between the two of them is emphasized there, yeah?
What need we fear? Who knows it when none can call our power to account him? Who would have thought the old man to have had so much blood in him?
Do you mark that?
The Thane of Life had a wife. Where is she now? She? Should I take
Oh yeah,
that elsewhere?
that's actually the Thane of Fife, right? It's Lady Macduff is who it is.
Well,
She's been
yes.
murdered. Yeah, okay, so what's your question? Sorry.
But since I'm talking of someone else who is very specific,
Oh.
should I take that elsewhere away?
You certainly can, but if you do, let's see. Because of the cross 2, I would say cross 2 trumps it. You know what I mean? Like cross 2 is always the real rule, right? So cross to the person who gave you your cue. The Thane of Fife had a wife, whereas if you want to do something with her,
Right.
yes, but
I
as
see.
long as
Yes,
it's
yes,
cross 2.
Okay.
There.
The Thane of Fife had a wife. Where is she now? What will these hands never be clean?
And in a text session, what I would suggest here, had we had one, is yours are not the only hands that you're close enough to use.
Yes, so I can.
You-
Okay.
right? Because these hands as his, and that's, okay, does that smack of editorial, directorial intervention on my part? Yeah, maybe, but I'm really reminding because it's an option, right? It's just like the fact that the audience is always here and that other actor, since you're right there, you can get right in there with those hands too.
Yes, okay. So I can pull them into my
Yes.
whatever is happening.
And actually, while we're stopped, I think we have a sense, I don't know if you guys feel it up there, but I suspect, not trying to impose this on you, but we have a sense of how differently creepy this scene is when you are always like, wait, someone is talking. Yeah, as opposed to this thing where you're off to the side being crazy and the two of them at a safe distance are conferring with each other.
Yeah.
And you're about to get a cue from this one, and then bam, you're over here. It's like a zombie who suddenly hears, smells blood over in this direction.
Yeah. Let's see. The Thane of Fife had a wife. Where is she now? What will these hands never be clean? No more of that, my lord, no more of that. You mar all this with starting.
Oh yeah, sorry, I keep stopping on this, but the starting is him being startled, which is a stage direction to throw him. So no more of that, which is apparently his behavior. So you're right there with him, and then that.
Yes. Will these hands never be clean? No more of that. No more of that, my lord, no more of that. You mar all this with starting.
Do you more, shit. Go to, you have known what you should not.
She has spoken what she should not. I am sure of that. Heaven knows what she has known.
Here's the smell of blood still. All the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. Oh,
What a sigh is there. The heart is sorely charged.
I would not have such a heart in my bosom for the dignity of the whole body.
Well.
I think this is Pray God It Be So, sir.
Oh, sorry, that's me. Pray God it be so.
This disease is beyond my practice. Yet I have known those which have walked in their sleep who have died wholly in their beds.
wash your hands, put on your nightgown, look not so pale. I tell you yet again, Banquo's buried, he cannot come out once grave.
Even so.
Look at it. To bed. There's knocking at the gate. Come, give me your hand. What's done cannot be undone. To bed.
Yes,
to
and
bed.
this is a favorite moment of mine because a stage direction is given. Give me your hand. No matter how bad it feels, you have to follow the stage direction, and then the goofiest thing imaginable happens, which is, okay, so this is me making things up, but I love to imagine that this is completely intentional. There's no stage direction that says give away or disjoin hands, right?
And I'm saying, are we going to bed now?
Right, exactly. And she has an exit cue and you don't, which means that the two actors have to have a fight in that moment. You know what I mean? It's like, we go off stage now. No, we don't go off stage now. You know what I mean? All of this is happening, which in a funny way creates the exact same dynamic as the two characters, because if the murderous assassin king's wife tries to get me to go into her bedroom, I am not going to go, right? So it's really fascinating to me because, but in this moment, what's great is this actor has no idea that this actor doesn't exit, and this actor has no idea that this actor does exit, right? So there's this moment of conflict over whether or not to go that has to eventually be resolved. You have to go, and you have to stay.
Right.
But there's this little, just mini tug of war, which I find really fascinating.
Wow.
To bed. There's knocking at the gate. Come, give me your hand. What's done cannot be undone. To bed.
Will she go now to bed?
Directly. Foul, mysteries are blood, easy, breathe.
And this, now, I haven't used this term nearly enough. For some reason, it hasn't really come up, but 4 lines or more is sort of my usual measuring stick for this. Now you have a longer speech. 4 lines or more, I call it "You Are Flying the Plane." And in that case, we don't necessarily, especially because some of the speeches get really long, you don't need to stay in one place, right? You have the whole run of the stage, well, and the theater, because I can come out here and talk to Marion if I want to, right? Rules are still rules. So if you're saying we, you need to take your fellow actor with you, right? Or if you're in the middle of talking to the audience and then you talk to somebody else, you have to go. But you're flying the plane, you can work the space completely as you see fit.
Foul whisperings are abroad. Unnatural deeds do breed unnatural troubles. Infected minds to their deaf pillows will discharge their secrets. More needs she, the divine, than the physician. God forgive us all.
Yes, and if you can connect physically with somebody on us, right?
Oh,
Like we
yeah.
us an hour, and it can be these folks if you want. Absolutely.
God forgive us all. Look at her. Remove her from the means of all annoyance and still keep eyes upon her. So good night. My mind, she has made at an end. Amazed my sight. I think, but dare not speak.
Good night, good doctor.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah, so many incredible things there. And this kind of, too, I think goes back to your question earlier about does it work for the tragedies? Yes, if you invest right, it can really be a powerful tool for these two, depending, and if everybody's on board, yeah? The funny thing is, too, that there are even moments of kind of comedy with this, like when she's trying to drag him off to bed, right? But still, the aura of the whole thing is so creepy. And the fact that he's freed up then to go talk to the audience about what's happening is so wonderful, too, right? And what I find fascinating is working this way. Frequently, there will be a scene and everything will be happening up here, and then suddenly, it's like if the audience's attention could start to wander, then somebody's like, foul whisperings are abroad, unnatural things, right? And suddenly the actors are in the audience's face again. It's like, oh, yeah, because that fourth wall is so, permeable or something. Sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. And it's so cool, isn't it, to have him coming at you with that?
How long does it take, to get used to the rules and know them?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, you have to practice this
Yeah.
with the rules
Well,
for
what
a
I-
long time before you automatically hear there or that
Yes.
and know what to do.
Yeah. I always tell people what you want to be doing is not, as actors, we do, I think, too much of this anyway, of constantly running the lines while we're in the shower or driving the car, which is not a very good approximation of what's actually going to happen to us. You know what I mean? Going over your lines again and again and again is not going to help you here. I tell people, be on your feet, walking. Walk on your lines. That'll get you used to walking on your lines so you're not frozen up on stage. The first performance I did of this, I was furious at the note I got from the artistic director. She said, "You're crossing on your lines about a third of the time." And I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm crossing all the time." And then about 2 performances later, I'm like, "I am not crossing on very many of my lines." You know what I mean? I had to admit it. I really wasn't doing it. I tended to just get rooted because as an actor, that's what when all else fails, that's what I do.
Right.
Root to the spot, figure, well, at least I'm not shuffling around, but it didn't work for this. But yeah, it takes a while. And there was definitely a time when people at Western started getting, you had people who had done it a few times and they were on it. And then the younger people were like, oh, I see how this works, and could follow in their footsteps.
Since it's unrehearsed, you don't practice it.
Yeah, you can practice by yourself, just so long as you don't practice with the people. Walk around your own house all you want, with your scroll in hand.
This and that, everything you want.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, because you have your lines memorized, right, for this.
Well, ideally, yes. When I do this, I did one a few years ago. There's a company in Ouray, Colorado that does unrehearsed performances, and the guy who actually played Richard III, one of the Richard IIIs when I was Hastings and Stanley, he and his wife started doing this. They do one show each summer, and he asked me to come out a couple times and participate, and I went stone cold memorized. I knew absolutely every word and tried to know the punctuation marks. But in the middle of this on stage, that's why I think even if you do that, I desperately need this, because I'd be up there and I'd be able to do the long speeches, but the cues, you know what I mean? I'd have to go, okay, fourth grade follow, fourth grade follow.
Right, because you only get a tiny portion of the
Yep.
cue. Yeah.
So I did know the lines, but
It doesn't always. Right.
yeah, I wanted that, desperately
yeah,
needed that.
for sure.
Is that something that's all the time?
You know what? I don't know what they do in Stanton. I think they've done, I have heard that they have done some cue script work. Yeah.
I don't know to the extent.
Yeah, I haven't seen one of those kinds of things in Stanton. I actually haven't been there in a while to see anything.
A lot of problems over there. The fire here, the whole thing. It's not great.
Oops.
It's beautiful here.
Yeah, it's really cool. But yeah, it takes so much time before you start being really comfortable. And then you just have to commit the heck out of it too. And you make mistakes and they get all absorbed because everybody's looking out for each
It's
other.
very embodied, kind of.
Yes. But within boundaries, right? So yeah, things happen unexpectedly all the time.
But also a great exercise for actors because most actors don't do enough listening.
Yep.
And this,
Even to their own
like they're I feel like there's an important, an aspect that a lot of actors miss, that they don't pay enough attention to listening to the people who are on stage with them, because if you just listen to what the last person said to you, it will at least give you a clue what's supposed to happen next. Most of the time, it doesn't happen to me because I just read it on my line. But if there's because you have to hear the cue, you have to listen to the stage directions, you have to listen for the stage directions, you have to listen, to everything that the person is saying to you, and really listen and not just be like, they're saying words now so that I can say my words next.
Yeah, the old
Yeah.
traditional theater joke of bullshit, my line, yeah. Yeah. And when I mentioned earlier the Eugene O'Neill, when this was at the university, I wouldn't have had the guts to do this, I don't think, anywhere else. But Long Day's Journey into Night, and I was assigned to direct it. And while I was working on it, I thought, there are so many places in this, like for example, Mary Tyrone at one point in the first scene says, "Why are you all looking at me like that? Is my hair coming down?" or something like that. And then one of them says, "No, Mama, your hair's fine." And somebody else says, "Don't worry about it, Mama." And her husband says, "Now, Mary, you're just being silly," or something. And I thought, so what if we unrehearsed this? What if I took out everybody's lines, and I took out everybody's lines, so I gave each actor only their own lines with no cues ever, and we started rehearsing that way. And I said, this is like a family. People talk over each other sometimes. When you think somebody says something appropriate for you to respond to, just respond, and we'll see what happens. And it was a really great, fun experiment, and we kept some of that. We never did go to the full script. In rehearsal, frequently, we'd get all bollocksed up, and the stage manager would have to say, hang on. Let's go back to such and such a place. But there were also so many wonderful moments, like when Mary Tyrone says, "What's with my hair?" And everyone would answer her at once, which felt very organic and natural. So that's kind of just an extension of this idea, because you couldn't really do exactly this, but we were able to bring that sort of energy of the mystery of what happens before my cue. How long? Is it 2 minutes? Or 3 minutes? Or 8 minutes before I speak again?
Have you run across anything that seemed to like absolutely work against the rules? Like, have you stumbled across anything that's like, shit?
Here's the worst one, and I cannot figure it out. In King John, there's this great little running joke. I can't remember what scene now, but the character of the bastard is a real smart ass. And he keeps saying, "And hang a calf skin on those recreant limbs." And he says it several times. So it's a whole bunch of different people's cues. But if they all take their cue at the same time, then the play stops.
Right.
And I can't for the life of me figure out what is supposed to happen there or how to square that with this. And it really frustrates me because I feel like so many other places it's so cool and so interesting, and that one gets my goat. So when we did it, we just rehearsed that section. I didn't know what else to do, so we just rehearsed that part.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
This is going to be a ton of fun.
It's pretty interesting. Well, then, like I said too, like working with the group of students, we did my very last semester. No, because it was the year before my last semester. The department chair wanted me to teach a class in this, and we were trying to figure out, so what do we do with this? You know, how do we make all this work? So we decided to do a weekend of Twelfth Night and I forget now what the other play was. Anyway, we did 2 plays on the weekend, but then, like, the design faculty wanted people to design it. It's like, okay, costumes, yes, but how, with the rest of this, how does it work? Because we can't have a tech week, because then it's not a surprise.
Right.
Right? So what we wound up doing, this is so crazy, I still can't believe we did it. We did a different show Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, each night. And then Friday and Saturday, we did the actual show. So we did like Henry IV and Winter's Tale and Twelfth Night and something else, and then the 2 shows on the weekend, one of which, yeah, I don't remember exactly what they were, but anyway, yes. So we actually wound up doing 6 nights in a row. And one of the benefits of that, though, was, like you were saying, it takes a while to get used to this. Monday night was garbage. I mean, we'd been working on this for 2 months in class, and people were just, you know, really just kind of pooping all over the stage. And then by the time we got to like Wednesday and Thursday, people were starting to really figure it out, which was fun. But then also I had a chance, like, we did Winter's Tale. Nobody knew this was coming except for the costume designer. Winter's Tale, when the old shepherd enters, it was me. And no one had any idea that was going to happen. And so, you know, introducing surprises like that is part of it, because you just toss the cue out there and suddenly somebody's coming toward you talking.
My worst nightmare.
Yeah, but it's, I don't know, you might be surprised once you do it a little bit. It's like, oh, this is really kind of exciting. Maybe.
All right, let's do it.
Another one? The lilac one? Oh yeah, and don't compare notes. And a word of warning about this, or a word of, not warning, but just reassurance. Your scripts are correct. At one point, you are probably going to think there's a mistake. There's not a mistake, your cues scripts are correct. Oh, cool, so you have a ton of action to the word. Yes, so hang on, I've got to get in my head who's who, right. Yes, so you will need to know that that is the shepherd, and that is the youth.
Okay.
So when you first speak, you are talking to the shepherd, but then you say this youth, so you have to, and you can do that a variety of ways. You can cross to the shepherd and then cross back and touch the youth. You can take the youth with you from the beginning, whatever you want, as long as that happens. And there are several things at work here, but do also remember cross to your cue giver, right? Because you're never talking, with the exception of Good Shepherd, nobody addresses anyone. You talk about other people, but not to them, so don't worry about figuring out who you're talking about. Just cross to your cue giver. Whew. Take it away.
Good Shepherd, tell this youth what 'tis to love.
It is to be made, us all made of sighs and tears, and so am I for Phoebe.
And I for Ganymede.
And I for Rosalind.
And I for no one.
It is to be made all made of faith and service, and so am I for Phoebe.
And I for Ganymede.
Cross to cue giver.
Oh, yes,
Yep.
sorry. And I for Ganymede.
And I for Rosalind.
And I for no one.
It is to be made all. No, it's still me.
If this is so, why blaming me?
Okay, yep. This
It is to
sometimes
be made
happens.
all of fantasy.
Okay, let's go back to the beginning. It's the only place to start this one. You're doing great. This is a crazy scene. Yes.
Okay.
So, and if it goes a little bit differently this time, that's also okay, because I will point out just real quickly that, like 21st century actors, everyone has gone back, as though we were rehearsing this, has gone back to where they started it last time so that they can repeat what they've already done. Isn't that fascinating that that's what we do? Everybody went back to the same place. You could be anywhere. No matter where you are at the start of this, it will all work itself out.
Okay. Good Shepherd, tell this youth what 'tis to love.
It is to be all made of sighs and tears, and so am I for Phoebe.
And I for Ganymede.
Oh, and I for Rosalind.
And I for no one. It is to be all made of faith and service, and so am I for Phoebe.
And I for Ganymede.
And I for Rosalind.
And I for no woman. It is to be all made of fantasy, all made of passion, all made of wishes, all adoration, duty and observance, all humbleness, all patience and impatience, all purity, all trial, all observance, and so am I for Phoebe.
And so I for Ganymede.
And so am I for Rosalind.
And so am I for no woman.
If this be so,
This be so.
we both have I for no. I for no. Okay.
If this be
Be
so,
so,
I
why
blame
blame
you
you
me
for
to love you.
Why do you speak to I blame you me to love you.
To her that is not here, nor doth not hear.
Yes, cool. Well done. That was actually much quicker than most groups are able to get this. Because there's always that moment of, wait, but that's my cue. Oh, he said the cue scripts are right. Oh, oops. Yes, because there is that simultaneous cueing. Okay, so what else do I want to mention here? Oh, yes. So in the midst of all this craziness, which is really interesting because you guys didn't really need a reset, but sometimes by the time you get to the longer speech where Silvius is flying the plane, we need Silvius to fly the plane because people are falling off into the audience or whatever, like there's something has gone, or it's gotten generally mucked up. Silvius, because of flying the plane, can always go anywhere, right? So the circling or whatever it is can stop because Silvius can go wherever, and then the whole train starts towards Silvius again. Of course, there's the overlap. What else did I mention? Oh yeah, and then that crazy line of yours at the end, which puns, well, theoretically, none of us were there. Theoretically, puns worked better for the Elizabethans than they did for us because they were more just tuned into them. It was more a part of their culture. So they would have heard her and here as being a series of puns, but always great to help them out with something even as obvious, action to the word wise, her that is not here and does not hear, or whatever, right? That's always helping with those puns, like the soul pun at the beginning or whatever. Think about the times that you see like one of the comedy show hosts whose joke doesn't quite land and they have to like nudge it over the finish line. I suspect that a lot of that helps with this. So, but cool, bravo, well done. Overlap, hooray! And stay up, because we're gonna need everybody for this. Just about literally, I think. I think there are 4 people who speak, and, oh no, yes, 4 people who speak, and then there are several people who don't speak, and there's a dead body and all kinds of things.
Take a dead body.
Oh, you're busy running that camera, aren't you?
I can probably set it now. Or out for a moment there. Okay, yeah, good.
Okay, so would you rather be the dead body or run away?
It doesn't matter.
Why don't you be the dead body? I'll run away. And then we just won't have a Lord Capulet, but that's okay. He doesn't do anything with the sea to be. Anywhere. Center's probably good since everything's going to happen around you. So somebody says at the beginning, "Why dost thou stay?" Right?
Yes.
Yes. And so then, oh,
Oh wait, just
Okay,
I got it.
okay.
I got it.
I thought I'd given 2 of the same cue script again. So you can say that to me and I'll run away, and then we'll go on.
Why dost thou stay?
Which way ran he that did kill Mercutio? Tybalt, that murderer, which way ran he?
There lies that. Oh, that's right. There lies that Tybalt.
Up, sir. Go with me. I charge thee in the prince's name. Obey.
Okay, now, hang on just a second. So you call him the,
Oh, yeah,
yes?
yeah.
So you have to be touching him,
Oh, right. Okay.
right? And what's interesting about this that I think a lot of times we don't think about in this scene, certainly in the rehearsed productions of it I've seen, this has not happened. This seems to imply that this character, actually, the way this is usually staged, is that this character is somehow down by the body, and she says, "Up, sir, go with me," to this person, and yet there's one person who is clearly on the ground, and we tend to assume in production that she knows he's dead. She doesn't know he's dead, she knows he's on the ground. "Up, sir, go with me. I charge thee in the prince's name, obey." Oh, oops, you're dead. But, right? And the "thee" implies that she gets right there to the body. The other thing, just to anticipate it, is that since until something tells you to get up, you wouldn't get up, right? Because it's sort of like the crying in a scene and then being told you're laughing. You need to keep doing what you're doing until something tells you not to.
Oh, okay.
Eventually, this is going to build a stage picture that seems very specific.
Got it.
Is why I'm saying that.
Okay. So back to
Yes.
back to one.
Why dost thou stay?
Which way ran he that killed Mercutio? Tybalt, that murderer, which way ran he?
There lies that Tybalt.
Up, sir. Go with me. I charge thee in the prince's name. Obey.
Where are the vile beginners of this fray?
Oh, no.
Tybalt! my cousin.
Yes, go.
Oh, my brother's child. Oh, prince, oh, cousin. Husband. Oh, the blood is spilled of my dear kinsman. Princess, thou art true, for blood of ours, shed blood of Montague. Oh, cousin, cousin.
Who began this fray?
Okay, let's stop there for a second. Yes, now this crazy line that otherwise doesn't make sense to me is completely justified. For some reason, in most contemporary editions of the script, the prince says, "Where are the vile beginners of this fray?" Benvolio talks for a while, and then Lady Capulet, who apparently walked on stage and didn't see Tybalt's dead body for a while, then has a freak out. And when she's done freaking out, the prince says, "Benvolio, who began this fray," which he already told you, right? But if these two speeches overlap, then the pause on Lady Capulet's part no longer exists, and the prince needing to have clarification after two people were talking at once makes sense. To single Benvolio out and say, "Why? Tell me now what it was," right? Yes. Yes. So the other thing is, let's do each of these overlapping speeches by themselves. Just take your time. You go first, Todd, and read us through all of that with, and I may stop you for a couple things, but with any action to the word or crossing to people that it implies.
Okay. Oh, noble prince.
So first of all, cross to the prince.
And, oh, okay. Oh, noble prince, I can discover all. The unlucky manage of this fatal brawl. There lies the man slain by young Romeo.
Yep.
That
Romeo's gone.
slew thy kinsman, brave Mercutio.
Yep. Yes. Cool.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are a few things. Crossing to the prince, distance from the dead body, and thy kinsman, right? Making sure that you are with the prince at the end. Cool. Lady Capulet, can we have yours similarly?
Tybalt, my cousin. Oh, my brother's child. My brother's not here, right?
No.
Oh, my brother's child. Oh, prince. Oh, cousin. Oh, husband.
Yes, and somewhere is Lord. Oh no, we don't have a Lord Capulet. Mary, you have to be Lord Capulet. You're the husband. Just when he says, "Oh, husband," you're going to have to help.
Oh, prince. Oh, cousin. Oh, husband. I don't know where I'm at. Husband. Oh, the blood is spilled of my dear kinsman. Prince, as thou art true, for blood of ours, shed blood of Montague. Oh, cousin.
Standing right here.
Yes. Yes. Right. So all the action, especially Lady Capulet, but to a certain degree Benvolio, there's stuff going on, right? There's a constant shifting of who Lady Capulet is talking to, from here to here to here to here, and it creates, the more of that there is, the more chaos ensues, right? And then you wind up at the end with two people definitely kneeling, or are we at the end? Is that the last of it?
That's my last one.
And then I have Tybalt. Tybalt here slain, whom Romeo's hand did slay.
Right, that's it. Yes, exactly, because you go down, I thought we were supposed to wind up with 3. So if everybody does what their cue script tells them, we wind up with this stage picture with 3 people kneeling by a dead body. It's so interesting. Instead of everybody standing around or whatever, right? It automatically gets us there because 3 people have gone to the dead body. I always make this offer with this one. If anybody would care to change parts, like it's quite a trip having to try to do Benvolio or Lady Capulet in this scene. Anybody else want to do that for fun? Switch roles around? Handoffs? Oh, nobody wants to.
Hey, you gonna do it?
Yeah, what am I doing?
Lady Capulet.
I'm already on the ground, so I'm dead guy, because I'm definitely not able to get up.
Okay, you can do this one now. This is now 5.
Okay, and just to be, because it's so crazy if we don't do this, why don't we do a little roll call that will help Lady Capulet and Benvolio, or whoever's Lady Capulet and
And
Benvolio.
our stream audience.
Okay.
Whoever they may be.
Tybalt.
Dead Tybalt.
Benvolio.
Prince. Sorry. Still a prince. Yo.
Benvolio.
Montague. Lady Montague.
Citizen.
Lady Capulet.
I will re-enter as Capulet after I run away as Romeo, so you will have me for reference.
Why dost thou stay?
Which way ran he that killed Mercutio? Tybalt, that murderer. Which way ran he?
Oh, there lies that Tybalt. that, Tybalt.
Up, sir. I'm sorry, I don't know who I'm talking. Up, sir.
Yeah, the only one who's down.
Up, sir. That's right. Go with me. I charge thee in the prince's names. Obey.
Where are the vile beginners of this fray?
Oh, noble prince, I can discover all.
Tybalt,
This
my cousin!
unlucky manage of this fatfall brawl. There lies the man slain by young Romeo that slew thy kinsman, brave Mercutius.
Prince, where am I at? For blood of Ange and blood of Montague. Oh, cousin.
And going who began this fray?
Tybalt here slain, whom Romeo's hand did slay.
Yay! Any questions or thoughts about this?
How do you, like, so say you have an entrance. Do you know if you're entering center, stage left, stage right, or do you just guess?
Oh, what a great question. Let's sit down and talk about this. Unless somebody else is just dying to play Lady Capulet, but
I think Mike's just falling asleep.
Little home day for him.
Up, I charge thee.
yes.
Good luck.
You did it.
We did a demo day of this once, like it was somebody's idea after we had done the outdoor performances for several years. Somebody said, what about a demo of how it works? And so we put together sort of a bunch of, kind of like today, except we weren't bringing an audience up. We were just having actors demonstrate some different points. And for this one, just again, because we're always trying to stay with the spirit of fun, so we asked for a volunteer from the audience to be the dead body, and there was this 8-year-old boy who was like, yes, yes. And it was pretty great. I will never forget that. He's probably 22 now. What did you ask?
How do you, what, do you have a sign
yeah.
to enter? Do you know ahead of time?
You don't, now, the part of this, to give you sort of a little bit of history, part of this is built on the writings of a guy named Patrick Tucker, who wrote a book called Secrets of Acting Shakespeare, and was doing some of this, but it was more sort of free-form, give it to the actors and never rehearse. These patterns, I think, of how to use specific language kind of came after that, because he doesn't deal with very many of those in the book. But one thing that they always did, apparently, when they met before the show, they would assign who enters where at which time during the show. We've never messed with that, and we've not had a problem with it. Usually the actors backstage will find out, you know what I mean, if it says enter Lady Capulet, Capulet, and Nurse, those 3 actors will find each other backstage and all go somewhere together to enter. One thing that has come in real handy, like if you're the audience and I'm the actor, one thing that has really helped, if we have a space that's conducive to it, is for people whenever possible to enter from behind the audience instead of from backstage. Because if you have something like, and in good time, here comes the sweating lord, and you don't know where he's coming from, it can turn a serious moment comic.
Right.
But if you see, you know somebody's about to enter, and you see that right behind the audience, there stands somebody looking like they're in starting blocks, you have a pretty fair guess at where they're coming from, you know? So that's generally what we've tried to do. If we work in a space like, for example, this, we would make some use of the sides, but I would encourage people whenever possible to come through the audience, because it also helps the audience feel more involved. And this is the place too where, that's one of the reasons I don't want to have the argument with anybody about, did Shakespeare's company do it this way? I don't care. We do it this way, and it's fun, and people get something out of it, and that's that. Because we know that Shakespeare's actors weren't probably doing exactly that. But we also know there's like some strange areas here, because we want to create what we think might have been the kind of atmosphere where the plays were performed, right, with a less formal audience and so forth. But when there are songs in the shows, those were written to popular tunes of the day. So if you want to do it like the Elizabethans did it, what is like the Elizabethans did it? To do it to the same tunes they did, which nobody in today's audience recognizes, or to set it to popular tunes that people know now, which creates the same spirit in our audience theoretically as was created in the audience when they were first performed, you know? So this gets into, because at one point when we did Twelfth Night, we took a vote from the audience to start the show about what love song they wanted us to start the show with. and they specifically voted for the theme from Titanic. And then we had the audience start to sing it, and Orsino came in, listened to it a little while, and said, "If music be the food of love, play on." You know, and so forth. But of course, the Elizabethans were not doing that.
Right.
I would never try to make that argument. So I can't say, well, this is the way that the Elizabethans did. No, it's not. But we're trying to capture what we imagine the spirit of the moment might have been instead. All of which smacks of some kind of directorial or editorial intervention. It can't help it, right? But what do you do? And also in Twelfth Night, they recite these, they start quoting songs to each other, songs that everybody in the audience would have known.
Right.
So, right, the equivalent of me saying, I don't know, I want your revenge, you and me?
Got a bad revenge.
Yeah, exactly, right? That's what they are doing, but they're songs we don't recognize. So what do you do with that moment? I mean, it's a question in any production of Twelfth Night, but I think in a way, especially for these, because of exactly the dynamic you're trying to create. So, yeah. What else about this, or do you want to chat about? That's pretty much what I brought for demos.
I think it was great.
Thank you. This, that, these, those, here, there, we, us, our, forms of thou, forms of you, across to people.
You mentioned punctuation from one of
Oh.
your students, and I know that's probably
yeah,
a
yeah.
whole different rabbit hole.
Well, it is, but if you, I do have some punctuation stuff with me if you want.
I'm curious. I don't know about it.
Well, you've all worked really hard. I'll do this one, not necessarily well, but I have just a little, this is fun too, what I do as a warm-up for people, like right before a show, action to the word, because it's married by these special marks. First, you have learned, like Sir Protheus, to wreathe your arms like a malcontent, to relish a love song like a robin redbreast, to walk alone like one that had the pestilence, to sigh like a schoolboy, and it goes on like that, right? Just because there are so many active verbs in it to help people warm up. And for punctuation, we use this one. Specifics about punctuation, the biggest thing is, and we use original first folio punctuation because even though there's debate about some of that, it's probably the closest, right? Only a period is a period, and that sounds stupid, except that actors have this habit of putting periods in Shakespeare, and so do editors, 21st century editors, putting a lot of periods in Shakespeare that were not in the original, and wanting to inflect downward and end thoughts all the time. So only a period is a period. Everything else is something else. A comma is like a catch breath, but the energy goes on. This one's controversial, but the way that I do it, a colon is like driving through a yellow light. So it separates the thoughts for the sake of the actor, but you sort of accelerate through and right to the next thought. Yeah? And a semicolon is similar to a colon, but there's a change of thought happen, like things are somehow going in a different direction, like there's some kind of contemplation. This is a Neil Freeman thing that's where I got these from, basically. What else? That's pretty much it. But with all the commas, a lot of times you start to almost hyperventilate, which is interesting also. If there be any in this assembly, any dear friend of Caesar's, to him I say that Brutus' love to Caesar was no less than his, period. If then that friend demand why Brutus rose against Caesar, this is my answer, not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more, period. Had you rather Caesar were living and die all slaves than that Caesar were dead to live all free men? As Caesar loved me, I weep for him. As he was fortunate, I rejoice at it. As he was valiant, I honor him. But as he was ambitious, I slew him, period. There is tears for his love, joy for his fortune, honor for his valor, and death for his ambition. So it's sort of, and this is something like this. There are other speeches that are likewise very interesting, but you get the sense in this, I hope you could hear it from me, that you're almost panting through it. Yeah. And thank goodness there are the periods that there are. Sometimes there aren't. Actually, I have one of those too, I think. Oh yeah, in a completely different kind of way. A good old man, sir, he will be talking, as they say, when the age is in, the wit is out. God help us, it is a world to see. Well said, faith, neighbor Verges. Well, God's a good man. And to ride of a horse, one must... I didn't do that right, damn it. There shouldn't have been a period. It is a world to see. Well said, faith, neighbor Verges. Well, God's a good man. And to ride of a horse, one must ride behind. An honest soul by faith, sir. By my troth, he is, as ever broke bread. But God is to be worshipped. All men are not alike. Alas, good neighbor. Because there's no period in there, right? It's comma, 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 comma. Yeah. So that's kind of how those work. I've always spent less time on this than on the other stuff. Yeah. This has usually been for people who are getting some of the other stuff in their bodies, and it's like, okay, let's talk about this too. Yeah, a little extra thing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about your book.
Oh, I will. I happen, by the way, they came disguised as ice cream, but
I wondered if
I do have 3 copies of it here. So I wrote this book 4 years ago, and it was basically the culmination of having done this for a number of years. It's sort of like this workshop, but with everything expanded. You know what I mean? Like there's a chapter about here and there, a chapter about we, us, and our, and things like that. And then stuff in the last chapter about how you produce it, the nuts and bolts of like putting together, what it takes to put together a scroll, what it takes to put together the master document, which we didn't even talk about, but that's like, you know, somebody has to go through and make a series of periods this long and then cut and paste them everywhere with 4 syllables after for all the different roles. In practical terms, when we do that, by the way, like it was nice at the universities, this has been relatively easy to do. Then you have a day when you get a whole bunch of people together and you proofread the scrolls, because there will always be mistakes. So you've got people, and you don't really read the whole script, you just go from cue to cue, but you mark down all the mistakes and go back and deal with them. So that's kind of in there. It's just like a guide, mainly from an actor perspective, but then also about, at the end, like I say, the nuts and bolts of like, here's how you build the scrolls, here's how you do a text session, here's the reference documents you want to have, things like that. So.
Are there other people that are doing things similar to this that you have a blood feud with? Whether you're like, I do it this way, they do it this way, and you know, I imagine there has to be.
You know, there are some different schools of thought, for sure. I know that, like the most obvious example is that my interpretation of iambic pentameter and how to work with the meter is really different from that of the woman who I first did some unrehearsed stuff with. Like, to me, hers is way oversimplified compared to what I think is in the meter. And so then, when I did this project in Ouray, Colorado a couple years ago, John was sort of doing her kind of iambic pentameter work, and I just had to sort of, when we were in the text session, I had to kind of bite my tongue because I was like, that's so oversimple. You know what I mean? Like, it's much more complicated than what you're saying, but okay, you're the boss. I can bring my own thing to it. And there was a situation when I was in Ouray, because he brought in a guy named Kim Carroll, who had been the other Richard III when I was in it. Kim came in to play the old shepherd in Winter's Tale, and I was Camillo, and John was Leontes. But John was also coordinating the project, and there was something in one of the rehearsed segments. I can't remember what it was now. I was in the room, but I wasn't in the scene. And Kim and John really disagreed about what one of the lines implied physically. And it was sort of one of those, we've all been in the room for something like this once or twice, right? Where like suddenly mommy and daddy were kind of fighting and nobody knew what to do, and you all wished that they weren't having this conversation in front of you because they really saw it differently. So there's, I guess, there's always some of that. And like I think that John's productions are, there's too much emphasis on being silly. I think I want to do the play, and if it comes out silly at points, that's because it was intentionally silly. And John's are a little more like, come on, yuck it up a little bit, which is not so much my style. But so it's minor stuff, I think. Really, I haven't gone back and done another one with John. It's not because I don't like John. It's two things. Being on stage really rings my bell now. I don't know why. It used to not when I was younger. It really sometimes can freak me out now. So limited amounts of that are all I want to do, which is, great. But I'm not in a hurry to do another one. So that's part of it. But part of it too is that if I'm going to do it, I kind of want to do it my way. But yeah, Blood Feuds is strong. But yeah. And I think it's kind of funny because the woman that I first worked with on this, she kept saying she should write a book. And I waited a real long time, and she never wrote it, so I did. And I have no idea how she feels about that. But she's moved on, she's doing really different things with her life, so I think it's probably not a problem, and I thank her in the acknowledgements. So.
Sign a copy and send it to her every year.
Yeah.
That's where the blood feud is.
Yes, yeah. But she did, this was unfortunately cut short. She was doing this brilliant series, and then I guess they weren't selling well enough or something. They were called like a frankly annotated version of, she did Romeo and Juliet, Scottish play, and maybe one more, where she did what all the other Romeo and Juliets don't, like, which is talk extensively about the body humor and all the sex jokes and things, because Romeo and Juliet, whenever it's published, is intended for one purpose. That's to sell to high schools, right? Like, that's the whole point in publishing Romeo and Juliet, to generate the sales to the high school. And her book didn't sell well. It was brilliant. I loved it so much because she went everywhere that it wanted her to go,
Well, Bill, thank you so much for this.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for coming and hanging out.
Super great stuff.
And if you want a book, come see me, because they are here.